Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. How does this mic sound as I'm kind of moving around? Everything okay? Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Well, thanks for coming, and thanks, Finney, for that introduction and for letting me stand in for somebody who had to cancel. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm kind of at a odd junction of my work right now, and I'm going to reflect on that a little bit, maybe more than you want me to, I don't know, but it's good for me. And then I'll share some pictures as well, and I guess I'll go to the first slide here. This won't be my most polished talk because it was a little bit on short notice, and also I'm working on a book right now, as I've probably told you many times, and I'm kind of in flux with some of that right now. So you'll see some stuff if you were here last year that's the same, but also some new material as well. I'm happy to take questions as we go or at the end. And so where I'm at right now is putting a book together with that title, which is a book across the whole state of South Dakota, which is a little bit more than I've bitten off in the past. South Dakota Yesterday and Today. And here is the book. This is everything I know about South Dakota right here. No, this is called a dummy. It comes from the printer, just because you can kind of this is going to be massive, and it's going to be 400 pages, which is a little bigger than the Black Hills Yesterday and Today book, but this is going to be sort of a model of, if you have the Black Hills book or you look at it over there, it'll look like that a little bit, but the same dimensions, and now I know how much it's going to cost to ship to people and so on. So this is good, kind of a starting point. I do have some proofs. So we're literally, I guess I should back up and just say, my wife Camille and my partner Camille and I do this production ourselves. We put everything into the book. I take the pictures, we do the writing. We have my friend Ernie Graffy does the editing. And we're literally laying this out on the computer. And I'm not sure that's always clear to everybody, so I'm just kind of mentioning that again. So every little decision about what size the font is and where the pictures are and everything comes down to sort of here, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and it takes longer than you think. So my deadline that was going to be March 1 is probably slipping back to April or May at this point. But I'd rather do it right than be on some artificial schedule, and we really don't have to have it out sooner than that. So to answer one question, I think the book will be ready by August of this coming year. I've been saying July, but it's looking like that could slide back just a little bit. So I appreciate your patience, and I know not everybody keeps track of all this, but that's kind of where we're at. Well, I'll kind of move along here. Some of this repeats a little bit about my past work, because I know there are a few faces here. Maybe I haven't spoken to you before, and so I kind of back up and kind of hit the high points of the work I've done in the past. And there's a few chairs up in front here if anybody needs a seat. Help yourself. Just come up the aisle there. That's okay. My specialty for about 25 years has been putting my camera where somebody did a long time ago. And that has become the basis of 5 books that we've done, going on 6 now, called all in this kind of a theme of then and now pictures, or yesterday and today, as I sometimes say. My partner Camille, designs the books as a rule, and we produce these together, and they're for sale at the museum and lots of other places around the Black Hills, or in some cases our national parks, Yellowstone and so on, where we've done some other work like that. Our first book that we ever did back in 2002 was this book on the Custer expedition, which covers their route through the Black Hills, including right here in Custer. And I kind of sometimes forget, I know this stuff intimately because I've written books about it. Sometimes people are sitting there, have no idea. So I'm just going to mention, if you weren't aware, the Custer expedition, 1,000 people, 1,500 horses and mules, 110 wagons, howdy. And if this building wasn't here and it was August of 1874 and we were standing on this hillside outside the building, they would be running right over us. They came down that hill just up, about where the road is, although that's been widened artificially. So right on this spot is where they camped on the town site of Custer, as well as east of Custer at another campsite. So it's right in our backyard. This is very much our local history, and the reason the town of Custer is here today. The town would not be here if Custer hadn't decided to stop here and then found gold. So, and we did a second book called Crossing the Plains with Custer, covering their route to and from the Black Hills. Here's the Black Hills, that book, and then this book covers the rest of that. And We just updated this book in 2023. I know some of you, many of you perhaps have already got a copy. Some maybe haven't heard of it yet, so I'm just going over that briefly. And we did update the whole book. We added 36 pages, 50 of these photo sites around the Black Hills. I went back to those on the same day that the photographer did in 1874, took another picture around 2021, 2022 is when I was doing that. We updated all the GPS data. We got scans of the original glass negatives. So it's like a new book, and I've got some over there. If you haven't seen the updated version from 2023, take a look, and I'll try to give you a little incentive to do that here in a minute. But this was how I got into this idea of trying to put my camera where somebody else did, based on a book that had been done by South Dakota State University back in the 1970s. That's how I kind of got the idea. 2000, it was out of print. So by 2002, we did a new book using color photos and so on. And I'm trying to get my camera, just exactly where it is. You see these same burnt stumps, and you can kind of start talking about what's going on in the forest in the background. This is a new photo for the revised edition, right off the Mickelson Trail, just up here on the edge of town, is where we think this took place while they were camped on the town site in late July of 1874. The champagne supper, and there's more about that in the book. I'm trying to kind of go quickly here, and then out on Calamity Peak, 3 miles east of town, the photographer climbed up there and took photos. And again, same dead tree, same live tree. There's a lot you can get into talking about these for longer than we might have today, since I'm trying to focus on some other work. But the other part of those books is a lot of written material. They're diaries, journals, newspaper reports, and so on that my co-author, Ernie Graffey, put together. And then the new book, the new edition, as I'll call it, has a lot of other material that we added about historic photo sites and so on around the Black Hills and other places. So that's Exploring with Custer and Crossing the Plains with Custer. And then following that, we did a book called The Black Hills Yesterday and Today, and that's very much a model for what the South Dakota book will be like in terms of size and somewhat in layout. I'm doing a little different with the layouts, as you'll see. But so this is the Black Hills after Custer was here. Other photographers were taking pictures, and so I'm out there matching those. Harney Peak or Black Elk Peak. There we are in Black Elk again, looking at Mount Rushmore as it being carved. So I like these later historic photos as well. And these are more of the type of photos that I'm using for the South Dakota book, taken maybe in the 1920s and 30s, although there are some from the late 1800s as well. And so this has been a 10-year project I've been working on, more or less for 10 years, off and on, kind of easing into it. I wasn't really sure I would be able to do this out on the plains because you're at eye level with trees that have grown up, and those trees get in the way, and we'll see that occasionally here. But ultimately, it's boiled down to 300 sites, towns and cities. Kind of these overview photos is usually what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a close-up of a building generally, because you can learn more from looking at kind of overview pictures. Landmarks, smallest towns, biggest cities, and late July, late July. We may have some books, or possibly early August, I don't know exactly. But the photos, people ask, where do you get all these photos? And again, I've kind of been accumulating at least digital copies of pictures for a long time, since about 2001. I bought a scanner, and that was pretty early on. But my friend Bob Colby in Sioux Falls has a massive Dakota Territory photo collection, like equals the State Museum. I'm not kidding. He's got thousands of pictures he's accumulated. He's let me make copies. Of course, the museum here in Custer, the 1881 Courthouse Museum, for things in this area in the Black Hills. I won't go through all of these, but if you're looking for old photos for fun or profit, or you want to hang them on the wall or in your business or whatever, go to the Library of Congress. They've got stuff you can download, even of South Dakota. Some really cool stuff. So then I do buy occasionally on eBay. I will see something. I was literally on Main Street in Miller, South Dakota, trying to do a shot, and it's like, this isn't working, there's trees in the way, and and I get on eBay and like, here's a shot of the other end of Main Street, and there's that building, and you $10, you buy the postcard, go do the shot, and now it's in the book. So eBay, don't bid against me, but and then this is Google Earth, and this is how I find the photos. So we got the historic photos. How do you figure out where those were taken? And sometimes it'll say, Miller, Main Street. I know where Miller is, and I go to Miller, and there it is. But by looking at what's called Street View in Google Earth, so this is Street View. The insidious Google, is everywhere, of course. they sent a car with a camera on it, drove down Main Street of, this is Belvedere, South Dakota, right along Interstate 90. Maybe you've never pulled in there, but there's not much there anymore, you know. But this is what it looks like. And so I'm sitting there at home some cold, dark winter day, you know, 5 years ago, with a postcard in my hands that I scanned from Bob Colby's collection or eBay or whatever. And I say, look, you know, I can see this will work. You get me? I can see in Google Earth, there is a building that's still there. You know, it hasn't all burned down. There's not trees in the way, whatever. So then I put a pin in a map, and I can upload that to my phone. And then 2 years later, whenever I get to it, having kind of done this hundreds of times in different towns and cities and landmarks, I'm driving down the interstate. I'm going to stop in Belvedere. Yep, I got 2 spots there, and I pull in and make a shot, you know, hopefully in decent lighting and everything. But that's kind of what I was doing this past summer whenever I could get on the road, was just going around the state trying to kind of hit all these places that I hadn't had a chance to visit earlier. So this is Belvedere then and now, you know, a couple of the same buildings there, some things that have changed. And then I picked this like totally randomly to put in the slideshow about a year ago, but since that time I've been in touch with a relative, a descendant of the 2 young women that are in that picture. I often say you cannot make up stranger stuff than really happens. They are both still alive. They're in their 90s, and one of them lives in Australia, one of them lives, I think, in Minnesota. So this descendant's like, yeah, that's Aunt Ruth and, you know, Aunt Betty, and I sent them this, and they thought that was awesome, and they don't remember meeting the photographer, but they remember this time. They said this is 1946, so now I know the date. You know, I was going to guess earlier because of the car, but you know, they drove cars like that for a long time after 1929, of course, and so you know, we were probably going to the soda fountain in the drugstore, but we might have been going to the hardware store. So they never talked to the photographer, they just happened to be in his picture, but there's no question in his mind that's who that is, and they both say, yeah, that's us. You know, I was taller, she was shorter. And so, yeah, that's an amazing connection, and it makes me worry that I should be putting everything on Facebook because, and I can't, but you know, there's always going to be some story like this attached to these photos. So half the reason I put out a book is to just wait for the stuff to start coming in from what people see that they can then tell me about, you know, in a project like this. But and then I've been doing these kind of movie things. I'm not going to dwell on this too long because I'm talking too much already, but this is more of a video, Facebook, maybe YouTube eventually. But the idea is that if the camera's in exactly the right spot, you know, the features that remain, like the cliffs and hills above Deadwood, are rock solid. They're right there where they should be. And then the rest of the stuff is change or similarity, mostly change up in Deadwood, the way these areas have adapted or have changed over time. So just a few random shots here, almost random. There's about, like I said, almost 300 of these. And this is 1876 Rapid City. And the views from 1876, I mean, that's like the beginning of, you know, white history here in the Black Hills, really, after Custer, are the hardest to do because things change so much. But again, I look at the background hills, and that will kind of point you to the foreground. And this is up on a hill where they have a water tank and so on in Rapid. It's public, you know, city land, but fortunately no trees in the way, and we're gonna be seeing more of that here. I love amateur photos. These are like snapshots taken by just some tourist. In this case, you know, he took photos of the dinosaurs. This is on Dinosaur Hill in Rapid City, if you don't know that. And they're under construction. So a professional photographer would wait until these were all done and then take a postcard view, you know, and sell that. But then you get this with the amateur photos, you know, they're taking odd angles and other things. And this is, I think, about 1935. I have that elsewhere. But, I don't know if you know Matt and Tanya here in town. They're landscape designers. They're doing this. They've done this project. It really looks nice. The grass needs to grow in and stuff, but they've redesigned that just recently. But those same figures are still there. I'll just back up. You know, that tree right there. Whoop, you know, I'm off by a foot or two there, so it's moved over. But so that's going on there. This is we're back in Deadwood, looking down over town. Again, one of the problems I run into quite often in the Black Hills, but also out on the prairie, is that there are trees in the way. I mean, this rock is in this picture right there, and then there's that rock, but you can see the background there. So this was actually a project I did for the museum up in Deadwood, the Adams Museum, And they wanted to use this specific picture because it showed buildings and so on that they wanted to have in the museum interpretation. So we took a drone and I got a drone and we flew in front of the trees, that are blocking the view. It's not the exact angle, but it's really, really close. So that works pretty well. And I had already come on to that solution earlier in this project. About 5 years ago is when I started thinking about a drone. I got my license, I'm commercially licensed, and I follow all the FAA rules, and I'm not flying in anybody's backyard or anything, just for this kind of work, obviously. But that's been interesting and challenging, but also the idea that the technology had moved ahead to a point where it would let me do work like that I couldn't have done 10 years ago makes me kind of glad I sort of waited to do the project. But other views are right on Main Street of various towns. This is Deadwood, 1930s, from the cars. And I do a lot of like stepping out into traffic, taking a picture, and then here comes a car, like this, but there's a piece of gum stuck to the road there or something, and that's my spot, and I'll go back to it and do this again and then try to capture some life, people coming and going and so on, that add a little bit to the modern view there. Hill City, some of you that have lived here a while, I've been here long enough, I remember this was the main road right into town, but now what was once a side street really is the bypass, that they put in that we, if you're avoiding Main Street when you go through Hill City, that you end up on over here. So there's Hill City in the 30s, I'll say this is the 30s, the other one might have been more like the 40s, but a number of these buildings still survive there. This is still a gas station, but it's just a little more upscale now. Tourist town, like Custer, beautiful, beautiful little mountain town that people admire. So, and then here we are in Custer, and this is about, I think about 1883. I still call this Flora's because that's what it was. I don't know what we call it. What's the name of that building? Anybody know historically? What was it called? Anybody? Flora's? Is that what? I guess so. Well, anyway, I should find out, exactly when that was constructed because it's under construction. The windows are vacant. And then there's the Kleeman House, which is down a little farther. And I don't know, I wonder sometimes if, like this building, when you look at it today, Baker's, is that the same building just kind of covered over with more wood? These are obviously bricks, so they've changed or at least have a facade. But it's interesting. I mean, there are people in this town, Coppices were one, they had this house and they started remodeling and they pull off some siding and here's some logs. They had no idea they lived in a log home from probably 1880 or something, and sometimes that might be going on downtown in Custer. Parts of downtown Custer burned, on the other side of the street. Now I'm really going off the rails, but someday I hope to do more study of just our Main Street here and kind of figure out, and people have done some of that work already, what was on each location over a period of time. And so this is 1876 Custer, and you kind of look for the background on these. You're looking for the background. I may have other pictures that show me how Main Street was laid out, and then I can kind of compare those and sort of start to figure out. But that's the junction of Crook Street and Laughing Water Creek. I could kind of figure that out. And so then that's where this is. But the foreground is so massively changed. I mean, this has been bladed and graded, and rocks moved in and rocks moved out and leveled to put in the apartments and the businesses here and so on. So things have changed a lot, but those background hills are still kind of visible, even though they're more covered with trees. Same thing, this is a similar view from like up by the hospital. And the next time you're up by the hospital or driving, behind, I was gonna say Shopco, because that's what that used to be, and now it's the hardware store. If you look up there, you'll see pillars of dirt as high as this roof with a telephone pole on the top. So that used to be the hill. The hill was all the way up there, and then they've, leveled all that down to make this surface that you see here where the hospital, was eventually built. I mean, they've carved, by they, I just mean development, and normal processes in any town that has buildings being constructed. So I climbed up on that hill where the telephone pole is because I was trying to get that elevation to match, because that's where this guy was. He was on a hill, he wasn't on a flat surface. That makes sense. So do the best you can. You can't always match it exactly, but works better when you got something like this. 1924 Gold Discovery Days Parade. And my co-author Ernie and I, or my editor, have been trying to figure out if that parade started in 1923. Gold Discovery Days started in 1922. Did they have a parade? Did they have a pageant? I think the pageant started in 24. Anyway, somebody here probably knows that. But Janet Boyer very kindly let me go up on the roof of her building, which is where I'd kind of calculated that was taken from. And this is the 2024 Gold Discovery Days Parade a couple of years ago. So, so a pretty good one there. And then you get into forestry and what's going on up in the hills and how things have changed. This is in the 1920s. And I didn't know this initially, I started looking at this 20 years ago, but these trees, and I bet Tim and others in here know all about this, that's, to me, looks like the aftermath of a mountain pine beetle epidemic. And some of us who lived here in the last 10 years have seen these trees that snapped off, 50 feet up, kind of like they did in the windstorm recently. But that's what that looks like. And I think there are accounts at that time of mountain pine beetle. Well, by 2005, I shot this for that Black Hills Yesterday and Today book, and that's what that area looked like up in the Needles behind the cathedral spires in Custer State Park. But I remember going, God, it's too bad about these red trees. I wonder what's going on with those, And I didn't have a clue, but that was like the beginning of the mountain pine beetle epidemic, which then spread, a lot of different places around the hills. And in this area, pretty well thinned it out. There was some logging. I think the park cut some of those trees as well to reduce fire danger and so on. But now it looks more like it did back in 1920 again, kind of. It's like you've seen this cycle repeat. And I guess, when you live long enough, you get to see all this stuff. But I'll have pictures of Sylvan Lake, Custer State Park. These are favorite themes of mine and I think of other people. So these are winter sports that went on there. 1930, 1933, 35. They had them every year for a while until I think like the middle of the Depression, maybe 1935. They're playing hockey. There's a huge toboggan run. There's other photos of toboggans whipping down here. What else is going on? And it's a little quieter up there in the winter these days a lot of times, but still, same rock. The hotel, of course, stood right there, burned down in 1935. And then up on this hill, I hope that's the next slide, is where this was taken from, more or less. They actually had a ski jump, and the Custer County Chronicle has stories. Once in a while they repeat the history, and they mention that an Olympic skier came in and did a demonstration. I don't know if that's him. He looks like he knows what he's doing, but and I think that was in 1935. So there's Black Elk Peak off in the distance there. Sylvan Lake is right by these two big pillars of rock, and that I did get out a year. Boy, we got some snow, and I got right out there to do this shot because it doesn't seem to last very long anymore. But so this is at the top of that ski run. And the park used this area to drag logs down, so they kind of kept it open for a while, but it's starting to kind of grow in now with young pine trees. So, and the game lodge and this beautiful bridge or culvert or whatever you want to call that, oak tree there. The lodge is exactly where it was with additions. The bridge is gone, the oak tree is still there. Just kind of trying to hit the high points there for you. But Gordon Stockade, this was, the picture was taken in 1876 because we know which army that is walking in front of it. It's General Crook and some of his troopers that were there after the Battle of Slim Buttes. That was built by miners in 1874 after Custer had left. Custer was here. These miners came in December, followed his ruts all the way right to where Custer had found gold. And then that was the group that had Annie Talent along, if you've heard of her. They built that original stockade, which was then, once they got booted out of the hills, used by other military groups and so on, like right here. And this is the third rendition, I believe. I think there was one built in the 1920s, and then in the 1940s, the CCCs built a replica, and then in 2005, the one that is there now. When they flooded Stockade Lake, it rose the water table into the ground, and so the logs would just rot off and fall over. So now they're sitting on pillars or a cement pad, which will keep them from doing that. But they did a pretty good job. I think it's right on the footprint pretty much, as far as you can tell from the old photos. So this would be just the other direction. Then down the valley, those same troopers, some of them that were in that other picture, were maybe camped here or near that time frame anyway. This is likely miners. I don't know that, but I believe those are probably miners who had set up on French Creek, again, during the gold rush, 1876. And then what I found, when I got to that spot, which are these rocks sticking out. And I actually Shot this photo originally for the Black Hills Yesterday and Today book, 2005, but I've gone back to a few of those sites again for the new book and taken a new picture, and then we have this comparison of 1876, 2005, and 2025, like I've showed you a couple of times here. But I had a question about this, and this is the original west gate of Custer State Park, and Tim and a few other people, Tim and Barb, my friends here, and others, I imposed upon them to come up and kind of model for me where that is today. So if you want to go see this, I'll just say briefly, I had a question about it earlier. The Annie Talent Monument, which is that pillar near the Gordon Stockade. If you're looking at the monument and you turn around, you'll see a little road going up into the woods across Lower French Creek Road, a slope going up, and that's public land. I think it's Custer State Park, and you're supposed to have a permit. But then it turns into Forest Service right when you get to this gate. You'll come to this gate within about a quarter mile up that sort of logging road if you want to go look at that. It's kind of fun. So this was the original east gate. That highway then continued around the back of Stockade Lake. That's still the old route. But then Highway 16A was built. I don't know what year, if anybody happens to know when Highway 16A was constructed east out of Custer into the park. I haven't looked it up. I wouldn't mind knowing that. But that replaced this highway. So, okay, enough on that. I mentioned having 3 pictures of some places. This is the 1930s. Needles from Harney Peak, as it says, now called Black Elk, looking towards the cathedral spires. And in 2005 or 6, I shot this again for the Black Hills Yesterday and Today book using a model who's in this room, a friend of mine, who then 20 years later, God bless him, there he is again. He was still there. And but I'm just going to back up because, again, you can unpack a lot here, but this is the 2006 forest with the mountain pine beetle just starting to come in again. Like I said a minute ago, I was over in that area when I shot that other photo, and by 2022. So it's quite different, and most of the trees that are left are spruce because they weren't affected by the pine beetle, right? And there's also aspen coming in, and other young pines are starting to come up here and there. And I don't see this as a negative that we had the mountain pine beetle. I think in the big picture, at least from my perspective, it's been a positive, reducing fire danger and kind of bringing the forest back to sort of what it should be, not a dense, overgrown, you can argue about whether you should log it or not and all that, but we don't have fires anymore. Fires, and I take, again, things like this for granted that people know this, but not everybody does. You move to Custer and nobody tells you, in prehistory, we had fires all the time here that would thin the forest. Well, now we put those out, caused by lightning, of course. And so that changes the forest over time. And yeah, that's another whole story. But and then Crazy Horse Memorial. I knew I couldn't just barge in out there. They have a plan and a program, and I know some of the folks that work out there, and I've been friends with people out there in the family for, I'd like to say, many, many years. So I approached them about this project. They're like, sure, this sounds fantastic. Let us know what you have in mind, what we can do to help. And they had, this is from the State Historical Society, this particular image. But I had done some work out there in the 1990s. This is a photo I took in 1993. I was doing some newspaper editorial books and stuff back then as a kind of when I was in my younger days. But and this is what they would call a production blast. They don't do this anymore. Some of these rocks coming off of there are, the size of a Volkswagen or something. I mean, they're really moving some rock, but they're still a long ways from the carving surface, right? So that's what they needed to do then. And then, of course, today, it's, really fantastic. And I just get so sick of these comments on Facebook, like, it hasn't changed in 20 years. You see that all the time. And it's like, no, it hasn't. So I've enjoyed this a lot. It's something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I shot this last fall, as late as I possibly could, so that it would be as far along as possible. And this is an actual spread from the book of those pages that will appear about Crazy Horse Memorial. We did an aerial, this is a helicopter airplane shot, and I did the drone thing. They very kindly let me fly my drone, and this is not something, that a lot of people get to do, so I felt very fortunate to So I shot that in 1993, and I'm still friends with a couple of the people in this picture. Steve Baldwin still lives in town. Rich Berry, if you know them, they were working up there at that time, and that's kind of how I got to know those guys. And flew out to about where I thought, the face was about the same angle, and of course the foreground has changed a lot. So yeah, that's really what I was after in this project for that sort of thing. I will, of course, have Mount Rushmore in there as well. Lots of, probably another 6 pages or something beyond what I'm showing you here real quick. Sometimes you run into weird stuff like this is, that photo site is in the restaurant. The restaurant wasn't there when the picture was taken, but that's the right angle, So there you go. That's kind of the best I could do there. Moving out onto the plains here, Badlands National Park, and looking down over what passed for a highway back then, became a national monument, I think in 1936, but prior to that, they were already putting in roads. This area really slumps and slides a lot. It's called Cedar Pass above the visitor center, and so they have to redo the roads pretty often there, but try to do matching light when I can. This is jumping over near Bone Steel, not at Bone Steel as it says on there, but the road to the Rosebud Bridge. There was a crossing of the Missouri River. Got permission from the landowner. I mean, I'm having to do that quite a bit, and that is time consuming, getting a hold of a landowner and trying to explain what I'm doing. And people are very welcoming. I had very little trouble with that. It's just a matter of finding out who owns it, and then, will they take your phone call, or are you knocking on a door where it says no trespassing? It's kind of awkward, but usually when they find out what I'm doing, they're very interested and all helpful. But the eastern red cedar is definitely, kind of encroaching on a lot of areas out on the plains, especially along the river. This is really close to the right spot. I mean, I'm on the right hillside within an area this big with my camera on a pole, trying to get over these trees so you can actually see the background, the Missouri River and so on. By Chamberlain, kind of the same thing. Again, this could be half-hour lecture, but the river will get bigger because they built a dam, they moved the bridges because the dam raised the water, and then also in the foreground, then all these cedars continued to spread because of the lack of natural fire caused by lightning, which would prairie fires, before settlement and fire trucks and so on. And again, the rabbit holes you get into, but I beg your pardon, I'm going to back up. That bridge, actually half of it came from that previous photo, Bone Steel. They floated them up the Missouri River like 80 miles to this location when the dams were built. I mean, again, you can't make up stuff. It's amazing. And it was a certain kind of construction that they could pin together easily and make another bridge. So that's the Highway 16 bridge at Chamberlain, and then there's Interstate 90 over there, and then there's a train bridge off in the distance. And we tried to explain all that in a few sentences in the book. I think that's over here on the table maybe, but I love abandoned highways. I don't know why. When you see one of these old roads, along the freeway, you're driving along and there's like this track and a culvert, and I just kind of like that. And this was sort of my ideal there near Chamberlain, to find a stretch of it that was still sort of semi-intact, but growing over outside of Chamberlain. I could see it in Google Earth, I'm like, that's where this picture was taken, probably along this thing I could see from space in Google Earth. Now, there's no ground level photography by Google of this stretch because they couldn't drive their car up there, right? But I could see it from space and then get permission from the landowner and hike out there and start looking around. And this is in that same area. The whole highway got moved over the hill to the right there behind the trees because of this being too unstable due to being the pure shale formation. It's this real mucky gumbo stuff. But and this is an example of a photo that I, saw on eBay, and I said, that's that same section of highway. That looks like it could, be an interesting site. So that's how that one came to be. And then little out of the way places like Harding really attract me as well. Harding, the business block, as it says here. And I've talked to the great-grandson of the guy who built these buildings on the phone, about this and what they were for. And they would order stuff. This is about 1905. You were a rancher in that area. You'd come to that house and you'd look through a catalog, and he would order the stuff for you. Then he would drive to Deadwood or to, I think it was Bowman, North Dakota, pick up your stuff that came in on some train, bring it back to Harding, and you would, get your goods at that point. That's how they were running this for about 20 years until the highways and so on developed. And of course, that changed all of our economy. But so those buildings are still there. And I knew that because I'd been through this area with the Custer Expedition book, the Crossing the Plains with Custer. Custer's wagon train, again, went right through, this virtual same area. So I recognized those buildings and again, purchased that card on eBay because I could see that was going to be kind of an interesting comparison. This is just Phillips, South Dakota. I see somebody hauling, in the old photo, you do what you can. I wish I could have got somebody hauling hay instead, but guy hauling a tractor there. Some of the same houses still there. You can look at that later. Fort Pierre, the gentleman that owns this house, got to know him through this project, and he's done a lot of work on that and owns some land that we did some other photos at. In fact, one of those is over here. The Missouri River, of course. This is Vernadre Hill, where that lead plate was found by, that was left in 1743 by the French explorers who came through here right on this very hill. It's kind of a park now, but it's a natural rise, and that's why the photographer was up there, I think, taking the earlier picture of his family. Again, just kind of random here, but Yankton, architecture. I'm very proud of the fact that there's a guy on the bike there, and there's also a guy on the bike here. You can't plan stuff like that. He just came by, and then he took a sharp left. He didn't go down the street, but you try to be ready. But again, this is kind of like stepping out, taking some shots. Here comes the cars. Go back and marking a spot on the side or on the pavement to keep that process returning. There are 3 Corn Palace locations. I know all about those now. I didn't know about them. So that's part of the fun, is learning some stuff. But this is the first Corn Palace location at 4th and Main. It's not very scenic anymore, but that's what it is. And then there's another one at 5th and Main, I think it is, and then 6th and Main is where it is today, if I have that right. So all 3 of those will be represented in the project, and some great old shots of the earlier Corn Palaces. The falls in Sioux Falls. Glass plate negative here from the Bob Colby's collection. And again, the lack of development. This is probably about, late 1890s. I kind of have to guess by the style of the clothing, the style of the photo, the fact that it's a glass plate negative maybe, and some other things. You can start to go crazy trying to figure out, when exactly was that building built, back in 1898 or whatever. So we do what we can. And that's pretty close to the same angle. The trees have definitely grown up. Water's still coming over the falls at times. They've built a lot of infrastructure there for tourists and so on. They've really redeveloped this in Sioux Falls into a very nice area. I worked in Sioux Falls in the 80s, and this was almost like you didn't want to be down here after dark and that sort of thing. So yeah, they've done some good stuff there. This was taken from the roof of the Queen Bee Mill, which was a 5-story building that burned down in the 1950s. Most of it did. A lot of it, some of it's still there as part of the park. It's a structure made out of rock, so it's still there, Sioux Quartzsite. But so you can't go to this spot anymore. But the FAA allows you to fly to 100 feet in that area with a drone, because you don't want to go to 500 feet because there are airplanes flying into the airport at 500 feet, or a little above that. So this is a drone shot that I did, tried several times, and finally got what I thought was a pretty good alignment. Some of those old structures that were used as part of the mill, the water was coming in here and driving these turbines, and I don't know what all, grinding wheat and making electricity. But and then Sioux Falls is kind of changing by the week downtown. But I actually did update this photo for the book. That's just the drone thing. If you haven't seen that, try to do that safely and carefully. And a place called Terry, which my friend Dr. David Wolf, who's here today from Black Hills State University, he and I went up there together and looked at this. And Terry Peak is the hill at upper left there. And if I have this straight from some of Dr. Wolf's excellent books that he's just put out that you should look at as well. I love embarrassing him. But anyway, they're great. And I learned that the last eviction notice was issued in 1986. So, a private entity, a company, owns all this land. And as they own, most of Terry Peak, or other companies might own that. But, by the 1980s, there are people still alive who remember living in this town, but there's nothing there now, as I'm about to show you. And, they were evicted at some point. The lease ran out, and they said, nope, we're moving the houses out because, eventually we're going to mine this area. And so I don't know if they mined right through here, and that's something I should figure out. But what I could really see, it's a conclusion that I'm drawing from looking at the pictures that I could be wrong about, but I think they were using this as a ramp, or they mined through there or something. So that's a lot lower, again, than it was when that photographer was standing there in 1900. And so I flew the drone again a little higher to kind of match those background hills and so on. So yeah, this is private enterprise. You own some property, you can mine it, and it's gold, it's worth a lot of money. So, I'm not second guessing it. They had a lot of jobs, and the mining company was very kind. This is Wharf Resources, or Core Wharf as they're called sometimes. Gave us permission to go in there. They gave us a guide. The person came with us and took us out there and, watched me fly the drone. Yeah, this is great, and told us about history, and we traded a few stories, and then we were on our way again. But Terry Peak is in the background there with the ski runs. So if you're on Terry Peak, you can drive to the top of Terry Peak and look down and see a lot of this. What it doesn't really show is what's over the hill, which is just a massive, like open cut mine, not the one in Lead, but a different one. So they do kind of tear up the landscape. They're supposed to restore it eventually, reclaim it. And that's kind of what this might be here. So yeah. That may end up being public land again someday, or at least available to go in. This is Faith, South Dakota. I went to the town. I didn't have any great photos of the town, really. I went to the local museum. It's in the visitor center. They had a panoramic image of Faith. And that was sort of a thing back in the 20s. Photographers had these cameras that would go like this, literally like a clock, and shoot a negative on a piece of film like this long, or maybe even longer, and then print those. And so you can do that with a digital camera by taking multiple pictures, or with the drone by just panning across, and then you combine those in Photoshop. And so I fly to the elevation. I'm looking at the bars on this thing, like the horizon is right between those two bars. That's pretty close. And there was a feed store there now, and the guy said, yeah, I remember when that grain elevator was there that he took that picture from, but it's been torn down and the railroad's gone, and but you can fly above my property and you'll be in the same exact spot. So that's what I was trying to do there. Wall, South Dakota, Wall Drug, of course. The Badlands in the distance. There's Wall Drug, getting pretty good traffic about I think it's like 1946. And so somebody's in an airplane, probably taken off from the Wall Airport, and it's harder to match an airplane photo with a drone than a picture that somebody took from a building that's stationary, because you kind of know where the building was, but where was this guy, flying by? And so it took a few attempts, but I felt like I got a pretty good match there. At least you can, when they're side by side in the book, you'll be able to compare what's changed there. And then the same token, Rapid City. This is East North Street, the Alex Johnson Hotel downtown. I forget the name of that school. On East North Street. It's now a pawn shop, believe it or not. And then I saw this house in the new picture. And again, there's a little shift here, but I'm flying my drone again above a parking lot there and trying to show the changes there in East North Street of Rapid City. Yeah, there we go. So where are we at here? Hopefully coming to the end. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, just a photo of, this is Huron. Big center for the trains coming through there, roundhouse and so on, and what that is today. Another drone shot there. And then, yeah, that's the extent of what I'm going to share from this project. If I forget to say it later, there are some proofs here. These are pages mostly along the Missouri River. That just happened to be the section we did first. So there's going to be a Black Hills section, probably like a third of the book, 150 pages, Black Hills, and then West River, more or less, including the Badlands, Missouri River, and then we go East River, Northeast, and East River, Southeast, kind of divided up into 5 sections. I wasn't sure what else to do, but I start on Black Elk Peak. That's the first photo, and the last photo will be in Sioux Falls, I think, is the way it's coming out. So these may change, but you're welcome to look at them. The captions may get edited a little bit and so on, but that's kind of what they look like. I just thought I'd touch on, how are we doing? Okay. Anybody got to go, feel free. I guess we're still within time here. The recent windstorm and how these pictures might help us learn something there. That is Calamity Peak east of town, east of Custer, 3 miles. And I call this the Illingworth tree after William Henry Illingworth, who was with the Custer expedition, their photographer. And after the windstorm, I noticed there was a slight change there up on Calamity Peak. And some friends of mine, Jim Laverick there, and Paul Meyer and Dave Mertz, January, fine weather in January, it was probably 50 degrees. We decided we'd go up there and look at it. And I brought them along because they know how to climb with ropes and stuff, and I needed ropes. And I am going to just mention, I'm serious, if you go up on Calamity Peak, don't do it lightly. Don't do it in flip-flops. I mean, it's a pretty easy to get into trouble up there, falling off of something. So just be careful if you decide to try it. But yeah, just wanted to kind of share that it is a little bit hairy. But that's what happened to the tree that'd been there a long time. It blew over the night of December 17th and 18th when we had that tremendous windstorm. When we had burning beetle, or not actually didn't have the burning beetle, but we had some of the events because the burning beetle got canceled, right, because of the lack of snow. Right in this room, they had a forestry guy and a history guy, and that was me, I guess, and then a guy from the Weather Service, and he kind of called this like, he doesn't know what to call this, like a 200-year event, 100-year event. I mean, he said the fact that there are trees over 200 years old that broke off or blew over kind of implies it's been a really, really long time since this much wind for that long of a period ever blew, right? So anyway, this is just my little documentation on that. So the tree is laying there in that gully where it used to stand. And that's the photo that was taken in 1874. That's one I fortunately took in 2020 for that revised book. So we at least do know what it looked like. And then here's what it looks like now, unfortunately. So yeah, and January 12th is when we went up there. So Dave Mertz, I was going to say first, I grabbed some pine cones off of it, and I'm hoping I can, get some trees off of this tree, but that'll be kind of cool to have in the yard. But then this was growing right under the trunk. This is a less than a 1-year-old pine tree growing right out of the same crack, basically, that the grandmother or mother had been in. So that'll be kind of cool to watch that for the next 300 years and see what happens. So and the reason I said that, Dave Mertz, then it used to be with the Forest Service. He's got one of these devices that you can do a core sample on a living tree or a dead tree and get those are rings. And with a magnifying glass, I mean, some of them are really wide, and then you get up to like 200, and it's like, man, those are really close together. And I'm looking at it with a magnifying glass, and he came up with 270, and I came up with 290. Somewhere in there is how old that tree was. So yeah, it's laying up there. Well, yeah, there we go. I'm gonna. You can email me. Sometimes a talk like this will generate, some emails and stuff and calls and photo requests and so on. In the next couple months, I'm really gonna just have to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that right now. But if it has to do with this book, specifically, and I don't have time to go out and take any more pictures. I don't need any more historic photos, but I'm interested in all those things. So please do email me. I might just write back and say, thanks, I'll get back to you in the spring or something, because I'm working on this every day, 10 hours a day, including Sundays, so trying to get it done, and it's going to take another month or two. So, but we'll try to post on Facebook once in a while, and on my website I actually have about 100 of these on display you can look at. So don't hesitate to do that. And if it suits you, yeah, I'm sorry. There's the website and a few sample images, one of which we saw there. And oh man, so soon it's over. Well, okay, yeah, and there we are. I don't know what happened there either, but it's kind of like the tree that blew over. It's just gone. So, well, what we could do if, yeah, thank you. I can't believe I kept that under 45 minutes. That's awesome. But are there any questions or anything that I'm looking for? Please take a look at those. A little feedback. I think it's where it's going to be. The pictures are going to be bigger. The captions are a little smaller, kind of overlaying the pictures. That's a change in sort of design, you might say. But I worry about these things too much and what people will think. And, you just do your best. And I try to kind of please myself, and then hopefully it pleases others. Yeah, Brock.
I'm assuming you took some pictures of here.
Yeah.
Get one of the 1950, I think it was 1952 flood.
He's asking about the 1952 flood in Pierre. Yes, there is one Main Street shot of downtown Pierre, in the water. There's a guy in a rowboat going down Main Street in Pierre, and that was before.
Floodwaters
Yes.
haven't changed much.
That's right. Well, they sort of have because they built the dam, Oahe Dam, for one reason, was built to kind of stop that. But I guess, there was some flooding even back in the early 2000s. I think they had a flood that almost got to that level because the Corps of Engineers was forced to release so much water because they knew what was coming from Montana. It still flooded, like Fort Pierre and so on. But, they try to manage all that. But those dams are, I won't go there. I mean, it's like they do a lot of amazing things, but they've caused some problems too, like silting in and, all the trees that got, anyway. And I have a photo of the dam just before it closed, so you see all these cottonwood trees, that were growing in that basin before they got covered over. But there is a shot of Main Street Pier in there for that very reason. I'm not trying to cover everything that ever happened in South Dakota. And, it's gonna be woefully, thin on a lot of historical subjects that I just don't have room because it's one page in a statewide book. But I put Wounded Knee in there. I've got some stuff from the reservations. I wanted to cover that. Small towns, large towns. Volume 2. No, don't even go there. Don't ask what I'm doing next, please. Yes, Carol.
Paul, I was just reminding people that Valentine's Day is coming up.
I'll get you your commission later. Yeah, your sweetheart would love a book about the Custer expedition. I know they would. Thank you, Carol. That's very kind of you. All right. Well, okay. I will be glad to talk. You don't have to buy a book. Believe me, this is just, like I said, clearing some inventory if I can swing that. I am going to just walk back and flick that light off on the projector, and then I will head over there, and I think we can hang out for a little while at least. You might see some chairs being put away or whatever. And if you haven't already, do join the Historical Society. If this kind of stuff interests you at all, $50, and go down and volunteer at the museum this summer. It's really fun. I do some volunteering, not like that, but other stuff. And maybe you're new to the area, didn't know that. This is something you can really get into and have a lot of fun and meet a lot of cool people and people that come here to visit, which is also really fun to run into. So, okay, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.